We have a process on our channel, and we typically every couple of months do what I call a Bob Lutz checkup on Tesla. As you know, Bob was a former senior executive at a number of auto companies, lastly at GM. And we like to do a checkup because we get a chance to evaluate whether or not his predictions on Tesla and other things happening in auto markets actually come true. And today I'm actually really looking forward to it because his presence, despite being gone for 10 years, has sort of re-entered the space of General Motors. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, would like some better ideas on investing and trading, please just join us on Patreon. So today I wanted to do a talk that's my Bob Lutz sort of catch-up talk. So I'm kind of tickled right now because of something that has gone on in the last few months. As you know, General Motors, Ford, and a couple of others, BMW notably is doing fine in terms of large OEMs on their electric vehicles. But what's been going on is that GM decided to initially cancel last spring the Bolt, and then look to introduce their newest vehicles, and then they then decided to withdraw poorly performing vehicles in terms of software in particular, and they then elected to return the Bolt into production. Now, I find this really fascinating because one of the comments often shared by some of our viewers is, well, why is Lutz relevant? Well, guess what? The Bolt was developed under Lutz, and it's still being used effectively because that thing is stable in ways that the newest GM and other vehicles are not. So I just think it's funny that, hey, you guys are saying Bob's irrelevant, but the vehicle he helped develop is still the number one seller for GM in the electric space. And it looks like it might be around for longer than they're expected because of the instability of the newest vehicles that have been put out. So I don't want to hear any more comments about Bob not being relevant in terms of what he did at GM. The next reason I think Bob is interesting, and as part of the checkup on Tesla and its comments made by GM, hey Bob, now that we're beyond the 2021 when you indicated that there'd be 100 different powerful OEM vehicles that would knock Tesla out of the box, you know, many of those vehicles have proven to not work out as planned. In particular, the fact that there's no charging network to match up with Tesla illustrates the point to the opposite of what Bob argued, which is there are no inherent advantages that Tesla has over competitors, whether it's software, whether it's charging, all these different elements he talked about. So I just think this is a fascinating circumstance because of what I maybe want to call it the GM arrogance, which shows up across a number of the OEMs. In particular, what I wanted to mention today is in the old days of 30 years ago, there was a description of process of what went on in the large OEMs, which is they would develop a car and then you wanted to get that car in the first 1 or 2 years of production, but because by year 3, what would happen is that the goal was to produce the car, but actually make a decent profit on it. And you could do things like, for example, shave down all the bolts, very incrementally small, and then start removing things that you initially put in that might be high cost items. And this would improve profitability, but it also introduced a lot of defects to those vehicles. So you had to be rather creative on when you chose models. So there are just a lot of rules of thumb about how OEMs might operate. The next question mark that pops up, and that is somewhat related to Mr. Lutz, is just the fact that there's been a question lurking out there for Tesla sort of since its inception. So what happened is that Elon actually did a process where 75% of the patents are open, with only 25% that are not. So what this allowed is, between consulting and the patents being open, it allowed a large number of competitors to get out into the marketplace. And Elon explained that he wanted to do this because it would limit the ability of large OEMs to simply shut down the whole industry with their industry power and make it difficult for him to operate. Well, I just thought this was interesting, and I thought it put the company in danger of kind of being wiped out by this strategy. Well, the reality became hasn't gone the way expected. And there are a lot of reasons, obviously, that's the case. The first one starting with the charging network. But there's something that, as a Tesla owner, you might want to consider, and that is Linux, Unix. So Tesla cars are running Unix, whereas other manufacturers are not. And I believe that right now, one of the reasons why the large OEMs are suffering is, not only do they have proprietary systems for a Microsoft or some of the other large operating system manufacturers, but they also have the problem of the fact that when you have Unix being run on Tesla vehicles, their ability to make changes and get the bugs out and get those vehicles running properly is better because of the operating system they're on. So one of the things we shared with you was a while back was that there are a lot of repair folks who work on Teslas that they can wrench on it, but a lot of them have decided to start learning Unix because it facilitates their having an easier time working with the diagnostics as they do repairs. So you might want to consider that if you're techie enough to consider that. I've seen some really innovative things done by owners who made a point of maybe sticking their hands deeper into the car than most people would. So the issue that's coming up that I think for a lot of the big manufacturers is they thought the software side of the house would be a no-brainer because it's really wheels, tires, and the other elements of a regular car, and that's turned out to not be the case. And we have a lot of people or a lot of companies where those management teams are having to rethink the whole process that they had in mind for getting their vehicles out. And this is unfortunate because now you have the potential for Tesla to gain market share and mind share of consumers because their solution is better and remains better. And folks like Ford and GM and others have had to withdraw from the field their vehicles because of their inability to deliver. Now, one of the fascinating components of Bob Lutz and others' comments, I think, has been the fact that there was this impression that all that GM and others had to do was produce vehicles, and then consumers would gravitate towards them naturally simply because it was being produced by one of the giant manufacturers. So I have to say that I was kind of stunned to see the consumer pushback of just saying, we'll leave those cars on the lot to rot until you guys figure out the charging. Hence, now, even though Lutz indicated that there were no competitive advantage associated with Tesla, all of those OEMs are now trying to get on Tesla's network as a way to clean up the mess between them and consumers that are buying vehicles that they can't find charging for. So I think that, one of the things one can do is look forward from, let's say, 2019 and the comments by the OEMs as well as Bob as part of that. And then let's look backwards from 2024 to, okay, what was your prediction about how things would work out and what actually occurred? And the answer is Tesla still has above 50%, heading for 60% market share. And it might be higher now because of declining sales for competitors. But the demise of Tesla in their control position has not occurred. On the flip side of that, competitors like GM claiming they're going to go all electric and they don't have anything ready yet is not a good sign long term for where GM will be, what it can do, etc. So I'd have to say that when you add it all up, you'd have to say Tesla is still running above 90, maybe a 94 or 5, and a lot of competitors that Lutz felt would get high grades and cause the demise of Tesla are really sort of sucking wind right now. So I think all this is worth noting. The last thing I wanted to mention, and I think we're going to have to do a whole show just to cover this, is just the fact that right now, as Elon chooses to cut prices to push sales a little bit, we're continuing to see a pullback of stock price because, as we've discussed, the price of the stock equals amount of earnings times the growth of those earnings. And so if they're declining, it makes it harder for the analysts to upgrade and validate higher prices. So unfortunately, instead of pulling above 200 as we predicted, it's pulled back on price cuts as we've been discussing for quite a while. And we're hopeful that uh, you know perhaps the number, a unit count, can help make up for the profit loss there. We'll find out as we go forward in this space. At any rate, um, look forward to, we'll probably do other Lutz where Tesla is headed and going updates. We look forward to your comments. Please take time to like and subscribe and join us on Patreon. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Also wanted to take time for our health tips as usual. Wanted to just remind you of the recommendation that a upper respiratory doc made about eating and going to bed. By eating with 4 hours allows food to fully digest. 2 hours at least allows some digestion, reduces the chance of acid reflux and other issues while in bed. So I just wanted to note that. If you look below, we have a number of other tips regarding health tips maintained by our sort of doctor recommenders. Anyway, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, au revoir, la hitro, hoda hefez, drasische, ni hao ma, kumbawa. And in Jamaica, we say, enough respect, walk good man. Arrivederci, namaste.